But there's an old rule every grifter knows. You got to keep moving. And where'd the Kimes go? New coast, same old scam. In April, in a motorhome, they wound up in exclusive Manalapan, Florida, not far from Palm Beach. Very pricey. And they repeated another pattern. A motorhome dealer in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, got a phone call from a couple who said they wanted to trade their motorhome for a new one. They'd pay the difference by certified check. The dealer, just like Jim Blackner in Utah, trusted them. According to Detective Tom Clark, that isn't so surprising.
Very convincing, very professional. They're very good at what they have done.
And this was the capper. The dealer was asked to deliver the new RV to Manalapan's very upscale Ritz-Carlton hotel. Just as they had asked in Utah, a long-distance delivery, a fancy hotel, payment by check. The dealer returned to Louisiana with the used RV and the check Sante Kimes had given him. How would a con artist sign the check? Was it a coincidence? The Kimes wrote, S.A. Con. Of course, the check bounced. But by now, unconnected events appeared to form a pattern of fraud, deceit, and violence. And the Kimes were on the road again. Destination, New York, and a meeting with Irene Silverman.
When we come back.
Did it look like an 82-year-old woman?
I think she tried to act like one, but I think she had padding also because she kept on trying to lift something up like this to make herself look heavy or something.
For years, the Grifters team of Sante Kimes and her son Kenneth crisscrossed the country, staying one step ahead of the law. But their past was about to catch up with them in what may have been their ultimate con, involving a Manhattan mansion and an elderly widow who owned it. Once again, here's Keith Morrison.
New York in early summer is looking splendid among the high-end brownstones of the Upper East Side. The Kimes have arrived. Are they grifting again? They crossed paths with Irene Silverman, a wealthy widow who was living out her own personal fantasy in a multi-million-dollar townhouse. Silverman rented out rooms to well-heeled clients just because she liked to. On June 14th, Kenneth Kimes approached Silverman about renting an apartment. He would pay the first month's rent of $6,000 in cash. He told her his name was Manny Guerin.
She just let him in. She let her guard down. She never did that. She always wanted references, you know. She was very careful about security.
Janice Herbert is a good friend and great fan of Irene Silverman. She loved Irene's stories of her days as a ballerina at New York's famed Radio City Music Hall. Of course, these were long ago days, in the 30s. But Herbert says that when Irene married her millionaire, she lost none of her love for life, champagne, adventure.
She was down to earth, funny, clever, generous.
And Herbert remembers her last phone conversation with her friend when Mrs. Silverman talked about having trouble with a particular tenant. She wanted to kick him out.
He was very secretive. She felt that something was wrong, and she was worried about it.
A few days later, Don Aoki, a notary public, received an unusual phone call. He says the woman on the phone urgently wanted some papers notarized, promised to pay him well if he would meet a gentleman in the lobby of yet another posh hotel, the sumptuous Plaza Athénée.
And I looked around, I saw a man by himself and started walking towards him. He got up and...
Later, Aoki would identify Kenneth as the young man who escorted him from the hotel around the corner to Mrs. Silverman's 65th Street townhouse to meet the mystery woman.
He had me wait in, I guess, the living room while he asked her if she was ready to sign the papers.
Who was the woman? Aoki was unsure. Could it have been 82-year-old Irene Silverman, as he was led to believe? Or was it Kenneth's 63-year-old mother, Sante? Did it look like an 82-year-old woman?
I think she tried to act like one, but I think she had padding also because she kept on trying to lift something up like this to make herself look heavy or something.
What sort of identification did they have with them?
They claimed she lost her driver's license and didn't have lost her passport and all that.
And there was something odd about the document she wanted him to notarize.
They were signed already.
Already signed?
Right.
They're supposed to be signed in your presence.
Right. And so then she started making some excuses.
Suddenly, the woman ended the meeting, and Aoki left, never knowing what was in those documents.
Did you hear from them again?
They called me Sunday, which would be, what, the 5th?
Sunday, July 5th, just days after a servant saw Mrs. Silverman arguing with Kenneth Kimes. In the morning of that day, Mrs. Silverman was seen walking for the last time outside her prized mansion in a nightgown.
It appears that where the Kimes have been, people disappear or end up dead.
Police Commissioner Howard Safer admitted that for once, the Kimes' luck had run out. They just happened to arrest the Kimes at the New York Hilton. On the warrant from Utah, the complaint launched by a card dealer named Jim Blackner. The detective just happened to see the sketch of a so-called Manny Guerin and realized it was Kenneth Kimes. But it was the green Lincoln that yielded the evidence that has kept mother and son in prison. The commissioner said that's where police found many links with Irene Silverman.
Blank forms, powers of attorney, real estate transfers with Mrs. Silverman's name on it.
New York police say they think Sante Kimes, remember New Jersey police once called her a master of disguise, was trying to impersonate Mrs. Silverman. They say she was carrying Mrs. Silverman's passport. They think the Kimes wanted Notary Don Aoki to witness papers that would allow them to steal the Silverman mansion. Also found in the car were wigs, a drug that disorients people, and a gun. Where is Irene Silverman?
Irene Silverman's body was never found, but that did not stop a New York jury from convicting Sante and Kenneth Kimes of her murder. In June 2000, the Kimes were each sentenced to more than 100 years in prison. To make their case, the prosecution relied on 129 witnesses, evidence found in Kimes' Lincoln town car, and detailed notes and diaries handwritten by Sante Kimes. Plans, the prosecution said, to kill Irene Silverman and take possession of her multi-million-dollar home. In March 2001, Sante and Kenneth Kimes were both extradited to California to face murder charges in the case of David Kasdan. Before Kenneth was extradited, he met with his brother, Kent Walker, in a New York prison where Kenneth was housed. During that visit, Kent says his little brother essentially confessed.
That steely resolve in his eyes was gone. He was beaten.
He admitted?
In not so many words, he admitted to the murder of David Kasdan, and he admitted to the murder of Irene Silverman. I said, you're going to have to turn state's evidence. He says, and you got to be willing to cooperate. He says, I'm willing to cooperate. That's a confession.
In November 2003, almost 2.5 years later, Kenneth finally made his confession official. He spared himself the death penalty by pleading guilty to the 1998 murder of David Kasdan and was sentenced to life without parole. His admission spared his mother the death penalty as well. During her trial, Sante Kimes testified in her own defense, maintaining her innocence, but she was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. That's our report. Thanks for watching. I'm John Siegenthal.
To subscribe to our MSNBC Primetime newsletter or for information on upcoming programs, go to prime.msnbc.com.